How's it going, everybody? I am back again, here to do another video, and I thought it would be a good time to go over some posts from the Dogfree subreddit, and this one was linked in the Discord by Sheepy, so thank you, Sheepy, for providing this post from Reddit. Before we get into that, though, I do want to go over some quick statistics about service dogs, and this is from a pro-dog website, mind you. Less than 1% of Americans living with disabilities use service dogs, okay? And just 2% of blind or visually impaired people work with guide dogs. Keep that number in mind. Basically, you should never see one. A real service dog, but of course there is no real service dog because there's no proofing system. But anyways, I'm going to talk about this post, and I'm going to keep my opinions out of it until the very end. From our Dogfree, a blind man's thought on guide dogs and dogs in general. Flair. Service dog issues. So, as the title states, I'm visually impaired, registered blind in the UK. I have between 2 to 4% of my eyesight, and am a white cane user for context. One of the most recognizable signs of blindness around the world is a guide dog, seeing eye dog in the US. They're highly trained pieces of medical equipment costing upwards of £60,000 or about $77 and help many people to navigate the world. However, there are quite a few glaring issues. Firstly, what if you don't like dogs? I myself cannot stand them. They smell terrible, they can be extremely unpredictable, are too loud, and invade both your living space and your bodily boundaries. In fact, it took me a very long time to admit to myself that I'm actually quite afraid of them. Another blind friend of mine has the same issue. You're almost expected to adore guide dogs as a blind person, and yet, for me and many others, this couldn't be further from the truth. The problem is a white cane cannot guide you. They're wonderful. I love my cane, but it isn't as effective as a mutt. It simply doesn't give you the same level of independence. You cannot keep a guide dog outside. It has to live with you. And what if you cannot care for it? The reality is, for a lot of blind people, it isn't practical to have an animal in your home. The risks of tripping over them or their toys are reasonably high, but what if they become unwell? I know I wouldn't be able to locate dog vomit or any other kind of dog bodily fluids. It also isn't practical for a young person. Most of my friends are out partying at university or are quite spontaneous people. A dog doesn't suit that. Guide dogs are only taught specific routes. To try and take them all over town is nearly impossible. Secondly, attitudes towards guide dogs have massively changed in the past 5 years. Probably since lockdown. I attended a blind boarding school for a few years. We had a member of care staff, LL, was blind like the rest of us. She had a guide dog she brought to work. That shouldn't have been an issue. They are extremely well-trained animals. Well, they only stay trained if you reinforce that training and don't treat them like a pet. L's dog would regularly jump at students, bark at anything that moved, and hump their chair in front of the head teacher. This was all the while it should have been quietly sitting under a desk somewhere. I get it, dogs aren't machines, but it was a legitimate safety hazard. L's dog would even steal food from students and slobber on their hands. At the time, I wasn't too uncomfortable with dogs, but I had to keep it away from my friend who was extremely uncomfortable. He was repeatedly told that she was friendly, but imagine being completely blind and suddenly having a massive Labrador jump at you and lick your face. It simply wasn't acceptable or even fair. I must add here that this was in our accommodation, our home. I don't expect those of you who haven't been to boarding school to understand what I mean by it being your home, but it really was. And yet there were several students who were afraid of dogs who were just expected to put up with it. This isn't even the worst example of a badly behaved guide dog. I went to school with a girl, M. She was a few years older and she eventually got a guide dog. It was so badly behaved that it would chase people and try to attack another guide dog. In the end, M had her guide dog taken away. It was retired after only a year, 60,000 pounds down the drain. The general public doesn't help with this either. You cannot stroke a guide dog whilst it's working, and yet people do, even when they're told not to. I've heard so many horror stories, people feeding working dogs, letting their children climb onto them, or even other dogs in public, where they're now apparently allowed, attacking them whilst in harness. Laughably, most dog owners think their untrained animal could qualify for the training. My barber has one at her house. It jumps up and invades your sexual boundaries. And yet she seems to think it could be a working animal. These attitudes only hurt those who actually have a trained dog, as you get idiots like that trying to pretend they know better. I'm not one to jump on the bandwagon of disliking the younger generation. I myself am Generation Z. But it would seem to be a trend in younger people to think that guide dogs are pets. I worked with older blind people for a while. There were several guide dogs there. They were wonderful, quiet, obedient, hardworking. The same can be said of the 2 older teachers at my school who also had guide dogs. They were perfectly behaved. Thirdly, no one seems to have an issue with the amount of funding the Guide Dog UK charity receives. I'm unsure of the situation in other countries. They are the largest blind charity in the UK, bigger than the Royal National Institute for the Blind, RNIB. Bigger than both the 2 blind colleges in England put together. Forget the blind aspect. They're one of the largest charities in Britain. You could argue that people benefit from the dog's training, and they do. But here's some more information that might be interesting. Only around 50% of the trained dogs pass to work. Within their puppy breeding program, the number is even lower, as most dogs do not have the temperament. That's a lot of wasted money. These animals also only work around 8 years. That isn't a very long time considering the training costs. Most people I've come across who support guide dogs are more concerned with the dogs than the people who are supported. They see a cute picture of a fluffy little golden retriever puppy, and that makes them decide it's a viable charity. I can certainly tell you that the Guide Dogs UK do not care about blind people. They are like most charities, it's all about the money. I and many others have had some pretty nasty experiences with them, but the general public doesn't seem to care, because, aw, cute doggo. There are many brands of technology currently trying to replace guide dogs, including the Lumen Glasses. They're the future of moving past relying on animals. I'm personally so excited for them. It's going to change so many people's lives. However, Guide Dogs UK are the first to try to put you off going the tech route and even turn sighted people against the idea. Lastly, dogs in general are not safe or practical around blind people. I often have dogs try to go for my cane or decide they can growl at me for using it in public. Many times I've been screamed at by dog owners because I've walked into their mutt. It gets exhausting. The dog wants to assert its dominance by standing its ground in front of you. But I can't see that. So the thing ends up getting hit in the face by my cane. I don't mean to hurt it, but the owners have no awareness. Dog shit is another hazard. I don't know if you've ever tried cleaning it out of a cane roller bowl. It's deeply unpleasant. There's no way for me to spot it either. I just get home and realize I have to clean my shoes and my cane. Telling many dog owners to keep their dogs away from you because you cannot see them seems to only anger them further. I was 18, sat in my local park at about 9 o'clock in the evening listening to music. Normal teen stuff, really. I had a man enter the children's park where I was sitting and let his 2 barking dogs run around me. I called out to let him know that they were not allowed in the playground and that I was afraid of them due to my blindness. He responded that I was a nonce and probably touched up kids because I was in the park. I was then told, "My dogs have more rights than you to be here, weirdo. You're a right freak." It went on like that for a few minutes as I froze and didn't know what to do. This was a fully grown man with 2 large dogs screaming at me. I could hardly work out where he was, and yet, I was told by several people that in that situation, I was the problem. I don't know whether anyone will be interested in this, but I had to put it out there. One commenter mentioned, owners not wanting to be told what to do, even by a blind person, unfortunately checks out. The bad behavior of the modern dog owner goes hand in hand with modern incivility. Elderly people have similar problems with dogs, yet dog nutters still recommend them, since they might feel less guilty about not visiting them. Unsurprising that the guide dog organizations are against tech, since that's mostly about greed in the first place. I wouldn't be surprised to hear that training standards are lower today. It is exciting to hear about the Lumen Glasses. This is an area in which AI could really benefit people and be more effective and cheaper and less dangerous than a dog in the long run. AI could identify hazards of various kinds. Now I'm gonna get into just my personal opinions about this. I don't think that dogs should be considered medical equipment because that sounds insane. That's like saying a potato is a piece of medical equipment because it provides nourishment. It's an animal. Sorry, mutant. A dog is a dog. You look at a pet dog under an x-ray, you look at a guide dog under an x-ray, they're going to check out. There is no service dog DNA. They're all dogs. And this person is coming from the UK, so their laws are probably different than here in the US, but in the US, it's on the honor roll. Your dog's a service dog if you say so. And there's no proof. So I say they're all fake. All service dogs in the US are fake. Someone says, I have a real service dog. Prove it. Go ahead. Prove it. Exactly. You can't, because that's not required of you. You need identification to park in handicap parking areas. So why don't you need any type of identification to break federal health code and bring a live animal into an establishment that sells and prepares food? Animal Uncontrol and I have done an entire video on this. K-Nun is kicking ass and just destroying this whole service dog narrative. Dog Culture Review has shared some great videos on just times that are changing. And no, banning service dogs in general, from a restaurant is not against the ADA, because they're not banning the person. They're saying, come back without the dog. And they'll say, oh, well, would you ask a person to be without their oxygen tank? No, they wouldn't. Because oxygen tanks are not banned from establishments that sell and prepare food. So to compare a dog to an actual piece of medical technology is fallacious. I understand that the law says that, but it's a bad law. Did you know that drinking and driving used to be normalized and there was no law against it? We'll cover that in a future video. So anyways, guys, thank you for watching. It's good to be back. I'll do a little bit of an update video because I had an amazing vacation in Florida with my great in-laws and my mom. And just a lot of refreshing human interactions and discussions about our disdain for dogs. So, that's going to do it for this video. Hope you guys have a great evening, afternoon, night, and see you next time.